came out, and it was one of those things where you go, okay, remember this moment. Everyone's going to ask you what you said. Okay, and in your brain, you get your little VHS record, and you put it in, you press record, and you go, here it comes, here it comes. And he came up, and he went to say something to me, and I was so in awe of, like, I was talking to Tarantino, that when I play that tape back to see what he says, all I've got is like...
Hi, I'm David Crow, a senior editor at Den of Geek, and you're watching In the Den, our brand new video series where we talk with some of your favorite filmmakers and stars about the movies that shaped them. Today, we're joined by the director of Jurassic World Rebirth, Gareth Edwards, to discuss his own formative experience, Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. It's a movie that he was not supposed to see. He was not allowed to see. And yet, it would change his life when he met Tarantino in person and was called Mr. Purple. Today, I'm joined by Gareth Edwards, who I can say without hyperbole has made some of your favorite films, whether that's Rogue One, The Creator, Monsters, or Godzilla. And we're here to talk on the eve of another little movie you might have heard about called Jurassic World Rebirth.
I still can't quite believe that I've been involved in those films. It's like a bit surreal as a kid growing up, just worshipping things like Godzilla and Star Wars and that. And someone introduces you like this, and I always think, oh, I'm going to see this really cool guy in a minute. Where is he? And then you go, oh, they're talking about you. And you go, oh, yeah, it's very anticlimactic, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were about to say, oh, I directed those?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of weird because like a year ago, we basically made this movie really quickly. Usually on a big blockbuster, you get 2.5 years. From the moment they first contact you and you go in for a meeting and they send you a script or whatever they've got, to the day you release the movie is at least 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And this has been like 1.25 years until we finished the film. And so it was half the amount of time you normally get. I kind of think I might put in my contract from now on that you have half the time, because basically it's double the money. Because you don't have to waste another year of your life doing that.
Yeah, they have the date and they're ready to go. But I also want to thank you for selecting a movie we're here to talk about in the Den. And it's one that I don't think needs too much of an introduction, but what a movie, Reservoir Dogs. Why did you feel drawn to Quentin Tarantino's debut film?
I don't know. I'm trying to think the very first time I saw anything to do with it. And it was, I think there's the film review show in the UK, Barry Norman, I think, saw some clips. And even just the clips, when you see something, you just go, I can't explain why. I think I'm going to love this movie, right? And it was just a few shots, a few scenes. It just looked like an instant classic. And I was, I think, 16 or something when it came out. And I wasn't educated in world cinema and a lot of the sort of more the exploitation kind of movie making that Tarantino was inspired by. And so it was just this crazy sort of it opened a door to a type of filmmaking that I had just ignored, through being fans of blockbusters and Star Wars and Spielberg and stuff. I ended up basically seeing it at the cinema. It was banned in the UK. They didn't release it on video because it was considered a video nasty or whatever, because it was gruesome, which I totally disagree with. But basically you can have two types of films. You can have a film where there's a lot of violence, right? And the character just gets back up like nothing happened, or it doesn't seem to care, which I think is a bad lesson for kids. Or you have a film where if you shoot someone in the stomach, they're going to squirm and cry for 2 hours straight before they die, which I think is a better lesson about guns, right? It really knocked me for 6, and I ended up seeing it 7 times at the cinema. It's got high score. I saw Back to the Future 3 times. I think I saw E.T. 3 times. Terminator 2 3 times, Cape Fear 3 times. And for some reason, Reservoir Dogs was 7, probably because they wouldn't release it on video in the UK.
It was the forbidden fruit a little bit.
Yeah, you always want what you can't have, don't you?
Yeah, and actually I was curious. So yeah, I knew it was banned in the UK, but had it been one you had been following? Because yes, you talked a little bit about the reaction already where people were obsessing over the violence, but this movie, very well received. It knocked people's socks off at Sundance, at Cannes, at Toronto, but everywhere it played, according to Tarantino, people were walking out. Were you following any of that?
No. So what happened was we saw it at the cinema, got blown away, went and saw it with some friends I was at college with, and then we heard that Tarantino was going to do a Q&A at a film festival called Nottingham Shots in the Dark Film Festival. So we bought tickets to see that screening, and then my friend went up a week early to see some other films, and I got this phone call at home, him overexcited, you never guess what just happened, And I was like, what? And he goes, I just met Quentin Tarantino. And I was like, oh, really? And he was like, yeah, he's just here watching movies. He's hanging out with people. Like, you can just talk to him in the cafe and things like this. And so I just got in the car and I went up to Nottingham, and we just booked tickets for the next film that was on, and it was Le Samurai, this French film. And we were just hanging out in the lobby, and there he was. I got him to sign a postcard, and because I'm, an annoying geeky fan. And then he basically was introducing the Samurai, and he did the introduction, and then we came to try and find our seat as we were going in before the introduction. We were trying to find our seat, and it was like these were taken, that was taken, and then we looked, and there was like a few spaces, and we were like, oh, let's go sit there. And I looked, and it was basically Quentin Tarantino, and so then we fought each other to try and get to sit next to him. And we sort of like falling out, trying to push past each other so we could sit next to Tarantino during this film. And then we sat there, and then he ends up going like, he goes, oh, have you guys seen this? And we were like, no. And he goes, oh, you're going to love it. And so he introduces the movie, comes and sits back in the seat, and then seems to spend the rest of the movie watching our reactions. And so he just sits there watching our faces. So I was like overly reacting, like, oh my God. It was a very surreal thing.
Did he say anything afterwards? Did he approve of your reactions?
He didn't, but what did happen is we went to the Q&A for Reservoir Dogs, and at the end of that Q&A, I had bought a poster, and I put it down, like, because he was signing stuff, and I said, oh, I've already got something signed by you to Gareth. I was like, could you write something else? And he ended up writing, and there's a quote from the film, Steve Buscemi's character says, I don't want to be Mr. Pink.
How about if I'm Mr. Purple? I mean, that sounds good to me. I'll be Mr. Purple.
You're not Mr. Purple. Some guy on some other job is Mr. Purple. You're Mr. Pink.
And so he wrote, to Mr. Purple, a.k.a. Gareth, and signed it. And I was like, I'm officially Mr. Purple. And I framed that poster, and it lived on my wall in my bedroom for 20 years. And I always thought, if I ever got to meet Quentin Tarantino, I'm going to tell him this story, and it's going to be an icebreaker,
Have you met him? Have you told him the story?
So what happened? Yeah. So basically, I did my first film, Monsters, screened it to an agency called WME. And they said, oh, can you go and introduce it? Can you go down there and introduce it? And I was like, sure. So I go down there, and it's a very small cinema, really nice cinema, but quite small. And you go in, and I'm like, hi, I'm Gareth. I made this film. And I start to talk about it. And as I'm saying it, I look and I spot, and it's Harvey Weinstein in the audience. And I'm like, oh my God, that's Harvey Weinstein. And then I look, and a few seats across, it's Quentin Tarantino. And I start going, I can't believe he's here. And so I end up doing this quick introduction, leaving, running around the back and going into the projection booth and just watching him the whole movie and just watching to see what his reaction was.
Turnabout's fair play. So yeah, you've watched his reaction.
That's true, actually, full circle moment. Yeah. And so I was watching him, and then basically at the end of the screening, he came out, and it was one of those things where you go, okay, remember this moment. Everyone's going to ask you what he said. Okay, and in your brain, you get your little VHS record, and you put it in, you press record, and you go, here it comes. And he came up, and he went to say something to me, and I was so in awe of, like, I was talking to Tarantino, that when I play that tape back to see what he says, all I've got is like, and all I've got is like, he's just like going, I'm Quentin Tarantino and I'm talking to you and I'm Quentin. That's all I can hear. I don't know what the hell he said. He was probably being polite and everything. And so it was a very surreal moment. And I told him, I was like, actually, you signed my poster to Mr. Purple, And you think, like an idiot, you think he's going to remember and go, oh, finally, we meet, And he's like...
I always knew I'd see you again.
I think he probably wrote to Mr. Purple to about 10,000 people. It's like George Lucas saying the Force is with you or something.
Well, actually, yeah, on that note, it's a very quotable movie. I mean, all the quotes I feel like come out of really amazing character beats. Like, for example, one of my favorite characters is Mr. Pink as well. And in the first scene, he gets this hell of a line.
I don't tip.
You go, what a terrible person. But that tells you everything you need to know. And sure enough, this is also the kind of person who's going to survive this ridiculous scenario we're watching.
Yeah, I think the structure of the movie is brilliant because it's like a pyramid where I can't remember the number of characters, but you've got like a handful of characters at the start. And then slowly as the movie progresses, it just gets a bit less and a bit less and a bit less. And then it gets up to the point, it literally gets to the point And what I love is you don't see the cops when they pile in at the end of the warehouse at the end. And the camera just pushes in on Harvey Keitel and Tim Roth until you've got just 3 people you care about and then 2 people you care about. And they're literally in frame, 2 people. And then he kills the other guy. He shoots Tim Roth, obviously, but out of frame. And there's one person you care about in this story. And then you hear bang, 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 and he just falls out of frame. And now there's no one else you care about. That's the end of the story. And the credits just start. And you go, that is perfect. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It doesn't try and do anything else. It's like, it's just that tale. And I love like the pureness of that. I think it's fantastic.
And I love, talking about the direction of it because, again, when it came out, people called it incredibly violent. And, maybe because I grew up in the after effect of this movie, I watch it now. I think it's maybe especially for Tarantino, a little restrained. Like, you don't see the ear get cut off in the torture scene. There is a torture scene, a very famous one in this movie. But what I think is really interesting is... and maybe you could talk about this, the confidence it shows in a first-time filmmaker, because, for example, most of the movie is set in this safe house, and you do not see that camera move that much once you're in the safe house. And then as we get closer and closer to the violence, the camera starts gliding, and you're seeing, and it's taking on the point of view of the person being tortured, and it's got a surreal kind of humor to it.
I think it's just very restrained, it's very classical. And even when it's locked off and what's interesting is like there's real brave choices constantly in that movie. Like there's what you're supposed to do. And it always feels like every time he gets to a fork in the road where he's got to make a creative decision and it's like, well, this is what you're supposed to do. This is what everyone expects you to do. So I'm going to do the opposite and just see where that takes me. And there's things like, they're talking in whatever it is, the toilet or wherever it is. And the camera tracks along and it just stays there. And it just doesn't cut in. Like any other filmmaker, it'd come across, you'd see that, and within about 2 seconds, you're into the conversation. It just hangs back. It goes, I'm not going in there. I'm just going to hang back here. And it makes you go, it makes you hungry to understand what they're saying and want to be in there and sort of frustrated that you're not. And I love it when a director doubles down on an idea. It reminds me a lot of like Scorsese. There's stuff like in Taxi Driver, say, where he's in a cafe and he puts those pills in the Alka-Seltz, whatever it is, and it just starts fizzing in the drink, and the camera just dollies in and looks at it, and then it makes as an audience, when the director isn't doing exactly what you want when you want it, it makes you go, well, hang on, why not? And then you start having thoughts about why not, and you start having thoughts you wouldn't have otherwise had about what is he listening to? What's he hearing? What would I be thinking if I was this person? And it creates all kinds of subjective moments in your mind that I think cinema allows for, that most of the storytelling doesn't. And that movie is just full of brave choices and random ones. And I remember at the Q&A, it was one of the interesting things you said was, someone said, what's the relevance of the red balloon? There's a shot where the car goes past and goes like, I gotcha. And he goes, I thought you got away with it, didn't you? And this balloon just bounces on the beat for whatever reason as this car goes past. And he goes, well, we were filming and a red balloon bounced past, right? And he liked the idea, so he went and grabbed the balloon, and each take he just threw it into shot. And his point was, because sometimes in life, red balloons just go past, right? And there's no reason, right? Deal with it. And I love all this sort of like nuance of reality, and it just felt ultra real and cinematic and kind of really, really gritty, and the performances are so like nuanced, and when it would do a little push in, when it did do a camera move, it had so much value because it had been so locked off, you know what I mean? It was just really, really confident filmmaking right out the gate, and the music, there's that soundtrack's fantastic. It was my soundtrack for a whole summer. I'd drive around in my car, my mum's car, with a leather jacket and a white vest, trying to think I was Tim Roth, looking probably like an absolute idiot.
I was going to save this for later, but Tim Roth, we're at Den of Geek, so I feel like I have to bring it up. He is Mr. Orange. He's an undercover cop in the movie, and in the scene where you realize he's an undercover cop, in a flashback, he's standing in front of a mirror going, I'm so cool, I'm so cool. There's a Silver Surfer poster behind him.
Yeah.
So as a 90s kid, I'm thinking, oh, that must mean he's Silver Surfer's cool. This is wonderful.
Right.
Is Mr. Orange cool?
Yeah. I mean, really, it's Tarantino, isn't it, I think? As in, I feel like Tarantino likes Silver Surfer. and that's why it's there. And Tarantino is cool by definition because he made Reservoir Dogs. Like, what other way of judging someone is there than making an ultra cool movie?
Well, I just wondered because, in the next scene you have the people he's working for talking amongst themselves, and they're like, you gotta have rocks in your brains to be an undercover cop. And
and the fact you don't see their faces, you know what I mean? And you just hear them go, you're just watching him go to the car through the window, and it never cuts to the cops. And again, another brave shot. And I don't know whether he got the coverage of them talking. I doubt it. There's just this no, we're not doing that. That's not what this film's about. And the fact that you don't see it's not giving you what you want. It's not doing all the expected things. And I love the structure of it as well, which is even classical storytelling, it tells you that in the midpoint of a movie, you're supposed to do a big twist that flips everything on its head. And in the middle of this movie, you learn, I'm a cop. You know what I mean? And then he goes, I know. And you're like, holy shit. It was just blew my mind. And I just think it's one of the, if not the best debut ever done.
It's definitely up there, especially in the indie scene. And I also wanted to mention, because you said the performances in this are wonderful, and they are. And I want to point out that Steve Buscemi and Michael Madsen were both cold, audition casting, and they were discoveries for this movie, really. And I thought that was interesting because I feel like you're very big into discovery as well in casting. Or do you feel that way? For example, I know Rogue One was something, it was your initiative that it was such an international cast.
I think Tarantino definitely raised the bar on the wide net and retrospectively obvious choices. Once they've been cast, you go, of course, you know what I mean? Obviously going to films like Pulp Fiction and stuff, and John Travolta and all that. It's once it happens, you can't think of anybody else. I mean, to be honest, Reservoir Dogs is it's a very male film, isn't it? I think it was Madonna. Someone interviewed Madonna because of the whole conversation at the start of the restaurant scene. I think someone said, how do you feel about them talking about True Blue and Madonna and Like a Virgin and that? And I think a comment, I just remember her saying it's a very male film, and I hadn't thought about it once. And I was like, oh yeah, it is, isn't it? It's it's all men. And it didn't occur to me because obviously, being a man, you can be blind to that. And it's like a stage play. It's you could take, I think they did, didn't they? But you could take this film and put it on a stage, and it wouldn't ruin anything because it's all very contained. And the fact you don't see the robbery, but you see the sudden bursts of energy after the robbery, and there's just so much about it.
It's, again, a movie about professionals as well. There's that line,
Nobody wants this. We're supposed to be fucking professionals.
Is that a storytelling motif that you're driven to people on a job that maybe often goes wrong? Because, for example, in the new Jurassic World, we have characters who are reminding me a little bit of the original movie, where you have people who are very smart and experts, and they're on a job of sorts.
I don't know what parallels. It was because David Koepp wrote the Jurassic World film. And obviously the parallels for me would be in an equal way. The original Jurassic Park blew my mind as a 17-year-old and changed my course of where I was going in my career. And so this movie was kind of felt like an opportunity. The bad way of explaining it to people was, my dream is that we make a film that feels like it had been made in the early 90s, and that Universal had forgotten they'd made it. They'd put it on a shelf somewhere, and then last year they were just going through all their library and they were like, what is this? And they blew the dust off, and it's a Jurassic World Rebirth, and they go, we don't remember doing this. And they just decided to release it this summer. But I wanted it to feel like something that harkened back to that vocabulary and style of filmmaking from that blockbuster era.
I appreciate that, and you see this, I feel, less in a lot of blockbusters today, that you have people who can be experts or passionate about what they're doing. Like Jonathan Bailey has a scene in this movie where he's explaining that, human intelligence is not necessarily advantageous for evolution. And that feels like something Michael Crichton would have written.
Well, it's interesting because basically, that little speech he gives around there's a moment where you go through so I was chatting with David Koepp about different things, and I'd like to do that there and this, just to have a little conversation. It got to that moment, and I can't remember even what I was saying, but I must have said something that made him think for a split second that I wanted to trim it or do something, and I can't even remember what I was saying. But it made him tell me the story of like, goes, actually that speech was in the original Jurassic Park script, and it got cut out. And he says, and I've always wished, I've always wanted to put it back in somewhere. And he goes, so I've put it in here. And the second he said that, that ended up putting a 10,000 volt fence around that dialogue, and going, well, it has to be in the movie now, because it feels like it was from the source. You know what I mean? It was like original. It was the Old Testament of Jurassic.
Does it feel harder to you to get movies like that? You said that 90s style. What is it about the 90s style to you that makes it distinct, and is it harder to get that into kind of a blockbuster format today?
I think the honest truth is, and this is where you just sound old, is it was just the age where cinema imprinted on me. You know, like I was 16-ish. And when it's funny, I spend like with younger people now, and you talk to them about films they love, and some people will just go, oh my God, the so-and-so film is fucking amazing. They'll talk about it so passionately, and I'll be going, it's all right. Like, what are you on about? And then they'll keep talking about it. And then I always go out of curiosity, how old were you when you saw that? And they go, I don't know, I'm like 15. And I'm like, oh man, that's the age I was when I saw like Terminator 2, Reservoir Dogs, Jurassic. And you realize there's this little sweet spot of growing up where it really, really like gets tattooed into your brain and becomes like the high benchmark of storytelling. And for me, so obviously that was the early 90s. And so I've always been chasing that aesthetic. And I think, I also felt like this was my last chance and first chance to shoot a movie on film. When you do like a guerrilla film, a small film, if you take the digital camera out and you put a film camera in, suddenly the crew would have to like double, to just deal with that. If you're doing one of these massive films, you've got like 400 crew or something. If you pull the digital camera out and you put a film camera in, you wouldn't even notice the difference. You know what I mean? You've already got all the infrastructure. And so it felt like this is my chance to do 35 mil. And so when we were doing the first Zooms with the the HODs, ended up talking to John Matheson, who was the DOP on this, and said, and they were desperate for me to just hire the HOD so we could just start making the film. And I was like, John, I really want to shoot this on film. And he's like, oh, it's great, because he did like Gladiator and Kingdom of Heaven and stuff. And so I just come out and I blamed it on John. I went, John's up for doing it, but he wants to shoot it on film. And I totally agree. And so then we just all linked arms the whole way and just said, we're shooting this on Kodak no matter what happens, and eventually got to do it.
I think Tarantino would be very proud of that.
Yeah, I felt like, yeah, exactly. I felt like if I can do one thing towards the school of Tarantino, like at the very least we could shoot this thing on real Kodak film.
Yeah. Well, I hope he sees it and appreciates it, and maybe sends a message to Mr. Purple here.
Yeah. Whatever the message is, all I'm going to hear is wow, 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 wow.
Gareth, I could talk to you all day about 90s cinema and Tarantino and Jurassic as well, but thank you for bringing this movie into the Den.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.